Okay, welcome everyone to this 30-minute workshop on MLA 8th edition. My name is Sarah Davidson Squibb. I'm a librarian here at UC Merced. And I'm going to be using sort of a slide deck as part of this presentation, but we're also going to be looking at how to create some citations using MLA 8th edition. So for myself, I'm also on the virtual private network just because I'm going to be popping into at least one database during this presentation. But I hope it gives you a great overview of MLA 8th. So our main goals for today are to, first of all, understand the concepts of sources and containers. So this is something that MLA 8th edition really focuses on. More to come on that. We're also going to be using MLA's template of core elements to help us build citations. And I think we'll find that that's super useful for us. And as we go through our session, recognizing some of the key characteristics of MLA 8th edition. So as we know with citation styles, there's always lots of details. So this is what we're going to be looking at together. So just a little bit about MLA. This is from the Modern Languages Association. It's a citation style. And some of the things that have always been part of that is that it's usually used for English classes, sometimes literature, languages, or other humanities courses. So those are normally the courses that might be telling you, hey, we want you to use MLA for your work. It's also a citation style where they use in-text parenthetical citations. So if you're writing a paragraph and you're citing someone or paraphrasing them, you indicate that with information in the parentheses. So it doesn't have those that information in footnotes or endnotes. And when you refer to your citations at the end of the document, it's in what we call a works cited. So if you see a work cited in a paper, you're like, oh, this is using MLA style. So those things haven't changed. In the second column, there are some things that the new 8th edition is emphasizing. First of all, they really tried to make this edition applicable to all different kinds of source types. And we live in this information environment where there are just so many types of sources out there. It also has a focus on the sources and containers, which I mentioned in our goals for today. And that's just sort of a concept we'll talk about. And it's really intended to offer more about principles and patterns rather than really strict formulas for creating our citations. So it still has patterns and what we should follow, but it's trying to also give us some leeway. So in their documentation, you'll actually find that sometimes they'll say, oh, there may not be the one exact way to cite something. Something could be cited in more than one way and still be correct in the citation style. Okay, so moving right along, sources and containers. So what does this mean? So on the left-hand side, I have something that I'm considering the source. So this looks like the image of maybe an article. So when you find something that you want to cite and use in your research, you have to see, well, what is the source? What is the work that I'm dealing with? Then you're also asking yourself a question about whether that source is part of a larger work. So the larger work on the right would be your container. So a source or the work could be in a container, and it actually could be in another container. And I'll illustrate this a little bit more. So on this slide, I have on the left-hand side some items that could be sources. So for instance, a book chapter could be a source. Maybe you're using just one book chapter out of a book. And the larger container would be the book itself. Another example is your source could be a journal article. And then the container would be the full journal in which you have that article. A source could also be a video, and then who's ever distributing it. So maybe it's Netflix, for instance. That would be the container. So almost kind of like where it lives. And I like this illustration, and this may be bizarre because I don't know if many people know about nesting dolls anymore. We used to have nesting dolls that my uncle brought us from Russia at one point. They were much more ornate than this. But this is an example of how we might think about this visually. So I might have an article in this interior nesting doll. It's really then part of a container. It's in this journal. Then you could have another container. So the journal then could be in a database. So I didn't do a fourth one. I wasn't getting that creative, but this is an example of source, container 1, container 2. Okay, now this looks really fun. So this is coming to MLA's template and the core elements that they have. And this template is also going to refer to containers. So I want to draw attention to a few things on this chart. So first of all, it is going to give us the elements. So it's saying that the basic way in which you're going to create your citation is that you're going to look for an author. It's going to be followed by the title of the source, title of the container, and it goes down from there. So contributors could be translators or editors. A version could be an edition of something. A number could be the volume of a journal, for instance, and maybe an issue number. Publisher, when the item was published, the date of it, and the location. Now, I think the location can sometimes be a little bit confusing. So I put over here that this refers to things like the page numbers or the digital object identifier or URL. It actually doesn't refer to the literal place of publication. So it's not going to refer to London, for instance. So these are elements. The other thing that it tells you with the elements is the punctuation following each element. So after your author, you put a period. After the title of a source, you put a period. And then all of these ones in between are followed by a comma. And then after location is a period. Now, if there actually wasn't a location, you would move your period to the final element. So that's the order of the elements, and we're going to be using this in building our citations. So this is a real departure from what they did in the past, but this is the pattern that we're going to be using. Okay, so here we go with an example. And I'm going to click on this for a moment and then come back to this page. So I'm looking at a book called The Great Central Valley, California's Heartland. And what I did is I went to the library catalog just to find the information about this book. So I'm finding the title, I'm finding the authors, I'm finding when it was published, and I'm also finding who published it. Remember, I'm not going to need Berkeley. I don't need that location. So this is where I was finding the information. So what I did is I took this template and I said, well, is there an author? And actually there were 3 authors. But in MLA 8th edition, if you have 3 or more authors, you just put the first author in, last name, first name, et al. Then you put in the title of the source, so the Great Central Valley, California's Heartland. In MLA, we're going to be capitalizing these words such as Great, Central, Valley, etc. And then with this template, I actually didn't use some of the elements because that information wasn't available. So I'm using the whole book. So it's not part of a bigger container. It didn't have other editors. There was no version of it or number. We saw that the publisher was the University of California Press, comma, and then the publication or publisher date was 1993, It was weird when I was creating this, it wouldn't let me put the period in this chart. So you would actually have to put a period at the end of that. Okay, so those would be the elements that I would put together for my citation. So this one was a little bit simpler because it wasn't in a container, etc. So moving on to some other examples. So this one is also a book. I didn't mention that the other one was actually a print book that we had in our collection. This one's a little bit different. So I'm also going to click on this. It's going to take us to our catalog. Again, I have title information. I have author. I have eBook information. I could also view the description. This is where I'm getting the publisher information. And this one's accessible online. So when I go to the book, I'm actually going to use this information up here as the location information. So I'm going to come back to my slide deck here and show that. And let me make that a little bit bigger. So here we go. Author, last name, comma, first name, period. And there was only one author for this. Here's the title of it. So the title of the book in italics. Again, the capitalization, period. Then the title of the container. This looks a little bit tricky, but what I did, let me go back to it. This ebook is in ProQuest eBook Central. It's kind of like a database of books. So that's why on here, I put ProQuest eBook Central, comma. There weren't other contributors or a version or a number. I put in the publisher information, the date. This date is followed by a comma because I have location information. And the interesting thing about MLA is when you use a URL, they actually, let me go back to the book, they actually want you to leave out the HTTPS : / or if it was just HTTP. So that's a little bit different, but why the URL looks that way in this one. So again, the template's kind of nice. We can work our way through that. This is an example which I took from some documentation that MLA provides at the MLA Style Center. And this is just sort of another example where they kind of did some screenshots of something here over on the left. And this is a little bit different because the very first example I showed you wasn't in a container. The second ebook was in a container, the ProQuest ebook. And then this one is an essay in a book collection. So the essay is going to be the source, and the larger book is going to be the container. And some of this might be a little bit hard to read, but they put over here that the author, this is kind of in the middle of the page, the author of this specific chapter is Edward Copeland. So they put Copeland, comma, Edward, period. The title of this essay in this book collection is Money. And so they put money in quotation marks for that essay, period. And then the title of the container is sort of up here. It's the larger title of this whole book. So the Cambridge Companion to Jane Austen. So that's listed here in italics, followed by a comma. And then this whole collection is edited by Edward Copeland and Juliet McMaster. So they put that information in here. This is kind of interesting. I just noticed that they don't have the first name for him, and I actually think that might be a mistake, even though this is from their site. No version, no number. And then see here in the middle, it's Cambridge University Press. So they put Cambridge UP. So if University Press is together, they just condense it to UP, comma. And then this was from 1997. This is microscopic, but it's here, 1997, comma. And then the location are those pages of the essay. So pages 131 to 48. And because it's multiple pages, they put PP period, the 131 to 48, and then period at the end of location. So this is just another example, and you're probably getting a sense of how this can work or how you can apply the template. And the MLA Style Center has an interactive practice template that one can use. And I'm going to show it because you may also be thinking, well, you already told me, Sarah, that you can have a source and one container, but you could also have a second container. So where do you put that? So I'm going to bring up the interactive practice template. And in this template, you can kind of see that they give a key over here. This is telling you author, title of source, etc. But here we go. This is going to look kind of similar to what we've been seeing. Author, and you could actually type in here, title of the source, title of container, etc. So if we scroll down, you can see at the bottom, it says add a container. So you can add that, and you start with title of container, other contributors, etc. Now you'll notice when they did that, up at the top, they had author, title of source, then they went to container. So when we added a container, it didn't put author in again, and it didn't put title of source in again. It just gave you information to fill in about the container. So I like this template that's interactive to kind of see how you would add an additional container. Okay. So this can be another example of using more than one container. This is also from the MLA Style Center. Looks a little bit different because I went directly to their website and instead of trying to fit this all on a screenshot. But it's still a little bit small. So to describe this, over here on the right-hand side, this is referring to an article. It is a journal article that's in a journal, which is container 1. That journal is in a database. So that's what this is up here, a journal article retrieved from a database. And this is kind of small, but they note over here, okay, 1, the author, and they put it in here. Then they put the title of the source, number 2, and they put it in here in quotation marks because it was an article. And they ended that with the period quotation marks. So then we move into the first container, and the first container says African American Review. So that is actually the title of the journal. And again, this is really tiny, but it's down here as number 3. There weren't other contributors or version information. There is volume and number information though. So it's in volume 40, number 3. And in MLA, in the previous version, they used to just have the numbers, but now they put VOL period for volume, NO period for the issue number. And they did this to try to just be more descriptive so people weren't necessarily wondering what was going on there. So we have this container piece with the journal title, etc., down to the publication date, and then the page numbers of this specific article. So ta-da, we have information on container 1. Then this shows an insert of container 2. So container 2 is going to be the database. And what they called the database is EBSCOhost. This, I feel like I want to tell MLA, please don't call it EBSCOhost because EBSCOhost has a million databases and this probably has a more specific name, which would help users get to the source. This is where I think you could probably put the actual database name instead of EBSCOhost, but that's what they did. We're actually going to leave 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All don't apply. There's no publication date for the actual database, but the location information is the URL that was taken for the item. And this is a permalink that came out of this database. But you'll notice again, they did not put in the HTTP information. They ended it with a period. And this is showing us all those things, vertically. Over here on the right-hand side is your final works cited entry. So this is really more, other than the colors in the boxes, this is really what it would look like on your works cited page, which may make a little bit more sense. So that's sort of another example for us. I think just sort of based where we are on time, I'm not going to go into this one of building the citation in depth, but it's a very similar process. So that example we just looked at was a journal article out of a database on EBSCOhost. So we could do a similar thing with a journal article out of a database like PsycInfo. So for instance, this is the article title. This is the source. It's in a journal called the Humor International Journal of Humor Research. That's container 1. And then it is in this ProQuest related database. And it's interesting that it's not saying PsycInfo, but I know it's out of the PsycInfo database. And it actually has, instead of the HTTP URL, it has a DOI. And MLA actually prefers using the DOI if it's available. So this is a digital object identifier. So this could be used as our location. So this is very similar to the other example, but this is what you might actually see in a database. Now, the good news is that a lot of databases allow you to create the citation in the database in the style that you want. So if I clicked cite in this database, it should or will very likely have MLA 8th edition. And we can see if it looks very similar to what we've been doing. It says it's works cited. That looks great. It has the author, last name, comma, first, period. The stability of laughter, period, and it has the double quotes around it. The journal title is italicized. Volume and issue number, comma, the date, comma, the location information for the source are the pages 1 to 21, period. And then it goes into, actually, we should double check that. That should be a period. Then it goes into the container. And what is interesting is that they're putting in the HTTP and the DOI. So this is an example of the citation is pretty good, but it's actually not perfect. So this can happen a lot in databases where you can use this as a good starting point, but it can be really helpful to still know what you're supposed to do in MLA so that you could correct this. So let's go back for a moment to the template because I want to check one thing. Okay. So again, when they start with title container, all of these are commas until location. And that first location, I wish I had both my screens up at this point. Okay, that actually looks right because that location ended with a period and then container 2 is the name of the database. So that looked correct. The only thing I would recommend doing out of this is I would definitely take out this URL and I would use the DOI. So again, it's helpful to kind of recognize what the style should be like. So moving on to just a few other pieces about MLA. MLA is trying to aim for also concise information, yet clear information. So as I've mentioned earlier, you don't have to put in the place of publication anymore. This used to be in MLA 7th, but you'll notice in 8th, you don't put Columbus. And also in 8th, I would not have to put the word print to say that it's a print item. So I think that's those are nice things that they're including in 8th. Also, we've already mentioned that if you have 3 authors, it's going to be an et al. If you have 3 or more. So they've made that a little bit more concise. And then the volume and number may not look as concise, but it's meant to be clearer about what those numbers really are, that it's a volume and number. And then they also put in the May, not just the 2016, if that's available. And then the PP is to indicate that this is pages. And you'll see that this one has DOI at the end, DOI colon, and then the numbers. So we've already talked a little bit about authors, about the 3 or more. And the format, if you had 2 authors, would be the author's last name, comma, first name, comma, and the second name would be like first name, here's an initial, last name. So there's a lot to keep in mind, and this is where referencing an MLA quick guide or something can be helpful. We've also mentioned that DOIs are preferred over URLs, and they use this inactive style, which is DOI lowercase colon and then the number. And we've already mentioned if you use the URL to remove this information. And then useful tips for page numbers. If you are writing a paragraph, and again, you're citing or paraphrasing, you can put the person's last name in parentheses, space, and the page number. So you won't actually include a P or PP here. If there's a page range, then it would be 18-20 as an example. Whereas in the works cited, we saw examples of an article, maybe out of a journal, was from pages 411 to 420. Or if it was a single page, it's a single P period 63. And this is just another example at the very end where we have the pages for a journal article. Okay, so we're going to end with true and false. So game time. I think I'll be answering my own questions. So is MLA a citation style commonly used in English and humanities courses? I'm getting a nod. So this is true. MLA features in-text parenthetical citations and a works cited page. This is also true, okay? Number 3, a works cited page in MLA uses P period or PP period to represent 1 or more pages. Yes, this is also true. So this is true in the works cited page. You don't have to use the PP when you're doing the parenthetical piece. URLs are encouraged, but HTTP or HTTPS should be removed. DOIs are preferred over URLs. Yes, I could have written this more clearly, but that last part, that's definitely true. And 5, when using MLA 8th edition, it's important to determine if the source you want to cite stands on its own or if it's part of one or more containers. And yep, another yes, another true. That's a real key concept in MLA that you want to be thinking of when you are looking at a source to cite. So I hope that gives you sort of a big picture of MLA and that you'll be a little bit more comfortable using the MLA template to either generate your own citations or to double check citations that you're getting out of a database. So that is it for today, and we are going to close out. Thanks.